So voter ID law, my name is Jess, and I'm gonna be talking about voter ID laws and why they should be implemented in the US. So voter ID laws are intended to ensure that a registered voter who says who they say they are is not an impersonator trying to cast a ballot in someone else's name. The laws, most of which have been passed in the last several years, requiring that registered voters should show IDs before they are allowed to vote. Exactly what they need to show varies. In some states requires a government issued photo, while in others currently a utility bill like California or a bank statement is also sufficient. So yeah, I'm here today to explain why a voter ID law needs to be implemented in the US. Requiring a form of photo identification card to vote is important to fight off fraud. It helps elections maintain integrity, and having an ID is already a necessity that becomes a norm in our society to validate a person's identity. So the first one is fraud. Voter identification laws are necessary to combat the serious danger of voter fraud. There's a long history of voter impersonation throughout the United States. Voter fraud not only interferes with individual elections, but also undermines voter confidence in representative government generally. The identification requirements are the most direct and effective way of combating election fraud, such as states have compelling interest in implementing voter identification laws. Voter identification laws are not discriminatory because they apply uniformly to all state residents. The laws require everyone to obtain a valid photo ID and therefore cannot be said to target poor or minority communities. No evidence in states that have enacted such laws reveals any discriminatory intent toward those populations. Furthermore, most of the required IDs can be obtained free of charge. Like your driver's license are held by almost all adults today anyways in America. The rationale behind these laws is to increase fairness and confidence in the American democracy. Also, voter ID laws help maintain integrity. According to Wesley Gardner, who wrote in a newsletter for statesman.com, requiring a form of photo identification to vote is important for integrity of elections. Recall the turmoil in 2000 election that ultimately led George W. Bush becoming president instead of Al Gore. Recall the accusations of voter fraud after both of Obama's elections. Many people have lost faith in election processes. As a country, we need to take vital steps to ensure the integrity of elections. Assuring the integrity of voting process is something that most citizens initiatively understand is the right thing to do. In 2012, you needed a picture ID to get on a plane, ride the Amtrak, open a bank account, perform any transactions with both business and government, as well as buying alcohol or tobacco. So why is voting less important? States must preserve the integrity of ballot process, especially in an area of close elections, given the potential for long disputed outcomes. There is a need for zero tolerance in voting fraud. A recent Washington Post poll showed nearly 3/4 of Americans support requiring people to have voter IDs to vote. Since 2011, 8 states have passed voter ID laws. According to the Washington Post, most states with voter ID laws make it easy without current form of ID to obtain the government, either free of charge or it's cheap. This would additionally benefit minorities, poor citizens who are currently most likely in the lack of valid forms of ID, and who suffer a range of problems as a result. For example, they may face very high fees in cashing a check without formal means of identification. They suffer problems in applying for state benefits. So you do need your identification card if you want to apply for things such as welfare, and that's what most minority people and poor people do. So you need you need an ID in order to get those funds from the government. So why not use the same thing for a voter ID to vote? So yeah, people are already required to produce valid identification for a whole range of activities. Why is it less important? According to Wendy Weisner from Brennan Center of Justice, during the 2012 election polling analysis Nate Silver estimated that a strict voter ID laws would reduce the turnout to 2.4%. That margin could easily make a difference in the outcome of a close election, but it's difficult to quantify the law's effects, since studies often rely that people say about why they did or didn't vote. Such self-reporting isn't reliable. Separating the impact of ID requirements from other factors affecting voting also poses a problem. In Georgia, for instance, black voter turnout actually rose 44 points from 2006, the year voter ID laws were introduced in the state, to 2010. But that might have been because then President Barack Obama pushed the black vote up everywhere in 2008. Thank you.